Hi, welcome to the Mercy Seat podcast, where in this podcast we talk about everything related to the mercy seat of Jesus. I am your host, Amaria Menifee, and today we're going to be going over the story of Boaz and Ruth. We're going to be continuing our series on Into the Old Testament so that we can see the Lamb of God shown throughout the Old Testament and into the New, because we want to be able to see Jesus all throughout Scripture, and we want to know that it is the same God in and out, inside and out. And we want to know his love. And so we're going to be looking at this story. And I love the representation of this story. It is the bride and the bridegroom. It is how we are supposed to be with the Lord. We're supposed to be his holy bride, his holy church. And I want to just make sure that we are representing that carefully. And so let's take a look into this story. We're going to go to Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. And we're going to start there, and then we're going to show you some things within this first chapter. And so, in the days when the judges of Israel ruled there was a famine in the land, and in the man and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife and his two sons and this man's name was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem and Judah. And they went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her two sons. And these took Moabite wives, and then the name of one was Orpah, and the other name of the other one was Ruth. They lived there about 10 years. Both Mahlon and Chilion died. So the woman, Naomi, was left without her two sons and her husband. For a woman back in this time, losing both your husband and your sons was a very dangerous thing because you had no heir. There was no way to reclaim your property. The property that she had been completely stripped away from her. All of her provision and all of her protection were completely taken away inside the land of Moab and in the country of Israel. So everything that she had owned was basically stripped from her because it was supposedly supposed to be given to someone else so that she could not have it back to her. And so we have to look at this from the perspective of an Israelite woman back in that time. It is almost impossible to keep going when you've lost both your husband and your sons. So this is a very dire situation for her. So we're going to continue to read. And from verse 6, then she arose with her daughters in law and to return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was, and with her two daughters in law, they went on the way and returned to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters in law, go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. Basically saying, as you have dealt with my sons, as you were faithful to my sons and to me. So then may the Lord deal kindly with you, just as you have dealt with the dead and with me. And the Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. So basically, she said, hopefully you guys remarry. And so, um, then she kissed them and lifted up their voices, and they lifted up their voices and they wept bitterly. And they said to her, no, we will not return with you. No, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters, for will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, and go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband, and this night should bear sons, would you therefore still wait until they are grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to come uh, to me. Uh, it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law but Ruth clung to her. So basically, no, Naomi is in such a bitterness, such she's in such bitterness of heart that she is so hurt that she just doesn't want them to come with her. She thinks that she is doomed and that the Lord is against her, but she's speaking out of desperation and she has absolutely no idea what she's talking about. And so she is talking to these women, and these women are basically saying, we don't want to go back home. We want to be with you because you have been faithful to us just as much as we have been faithful to you. Orpah kisses her and leaves. Ruth clings to her and does not want to go. She is dead set on being faithful to this woman because she loved her son and she cared so deeply about this family. And so and she took, and she said, see, your sister in law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister in law. She's basically saying this to Ruth. She says, Ruth, go with your sister in law and go back to your land and go back to your gods because they are going to be better for you. But little does she know. So, but Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge I will lodge, and where your people are, so they are my people, and your God will be my God, and where you die I will die, and there I will be buried with you. May the Lord do so to me and more, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So Ruth was so dedicated to Naomi that she was ready to give up all of her livelihood just so that she could stay with Naomi to be faithful towards her. I am so in love with this aspect because this is the aspect that the church is supposed to follow. We are supposed to be the beautiful bride. We're supposed to be the ones that are so faithful and so set that we are not willing to turn back to the ways of which we came. And so Naomi and Ruth return, and so the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come into Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the woman said, is this Naomi? And she said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. Mara means bitterness. And so the Almighty has dealt with me very bitterly. And I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter in law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. So, two things I want to go over here. Naomi is claiming out of her own self doubt and pity for herself, that she is claiming that God has completely forgotten her and abandoned her. But little does she know that the Lord has already brought a redeemer, a guardian redeemer, which in the law, a guardian redeemer is someone who redeems the land, the woman, the price, and all of the possession, protection, and responsibility of her life. Because a guardian redeemer is someone who cares so deeply that they are willing to completely let go of their own name for the sake of their brother, for the sake of a fellow Israelite. And so this is where we see this aspect. In chapter 2, we see that Ruth meets a man named Boaz, and Boaz has already heard of Ruth, but he plays dumb, as most men do. When we're thinking that we like a woman, we kind of act a little, who's this? Who is this that I see with my eyes? She's so beautiful. And yet he stays away from her at this instance. And so we first need to understand the dire situation of Ruth before we go into the second part of the story. And so the dire situation for Ruth is that she is a first generation Moabite. And Ruth is not allowed to stay in the congregation of Israel. She is not allowed to be a part of the Israelite community. And she is not supposed to be around any Israelite, let alone be married to one. And so we see this in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 2 through 4. Because no one born of a forbidden union may be in the assembly of the Lord. even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord. No Ammonite or Moabite may enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of them may enter into the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet with you. They did not meet you with bread and with water on the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you. So that's the reason why the Moabites were not allowed into the congregation of Israel, because the Moabites had tried to put a curse upon the people of Israel. And if we know the story of Balaam, we know Balaam and the donkey. The donkey told him, don't go do that, but he went and did it anyway. And eventually he was killed. And the Moabites were told that they were not allowed in the congregation of Israel because Israel was enticed into sexual fornication inside of the Israelite camp and in front of the tent of meeting where the house of the Lord was. And so this was a very dire situation, and it was very hard for the people to overcome. And so we're trying to get you to see that the situation for Ruth and Naomi is almost impossible. But there is something called the law of stacking. And so God has stacked the law in Ruth's favor. And so we also need to see that this law has been stacked in her favor so that she is able to go and actually glean in the fields of the Israelites. And so we're going to read that. And so now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man. So this is Ruth chapter 2. And now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go into the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. And so she set out, and she went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to the part of the field that belonged to Boaz. She just happened to come into the field. I don't think so. So, who was the who was of the clan of Elimelech? And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to his reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered, the Lord bless you. And then Boaz said to his young man, who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? Notice how he didn't say, who is this young woman? He says, whose young woman is this? Because he had already heard that Ruth was in town. Because remember, in the first chapter, it says the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem, and then all of the town was stirred because of them. So the whole town was stirred up. So Boaz must have heard of Ruth and Naomi returning. And so he says, whose woman is this? Saying, is she free? Is she a woman of character, a woman of right standing? Is she unmarried or is she single? And so in this place we have to see. And so Ruth gleaned from the fields even though she was a Moabite. In three different places the law made provision for a widow, a foreigner, and a widow and a foreigner to glean from the fields. And so Boaz said, whose young woman is this? Ruth chapter 2, verse 5. He did not ask who she was because he had already heard from her from the others, and he knew of her reputation. And so if he knew of her reputation, and in her reputation, but Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you have left your father and mother, and how you left your native land to come to a people that you did not know before. So he already knew. That is Ruth chapter 2, verse 11. So he had already knew about everything that she had done, and he knew that she was a woman of valor. But he asked, whose woman is this? To see if she was single. Basically, Boaz is trying to spit game. And so we have to see this, uh, just just to make it fun. And so Boaz, Boaz's servant tried to dissuade him because she was a first generation Moabite who had come from Moab. In Ruth chapter 2 verse 6. And so Ruth chapter 2 verse 6. And so The servant who was in charge of the reapers said, "She is a young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." Bad mojo. So she said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves for the after the reapers." So she came and she was continued, and she continued. Okay. She came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter. Do not go and glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women, and let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you, and that when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn?" And then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and she said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" So this is something that we need to see. So he goes above and beyond. He knows that she's a Moabite. He knows that this is completely against all his nature and that he should not be communing with her. But in the law of Moses, there are three specific places where she is allowed to glean, and that it is actually uh, coming for in her favor, so that she can come and actually be able to glean in the field of Boaz. And so that's why he says, "Do not go to any other field," because he is starting to take a liking to Ruth, and he is dead set on redeeming her, because he can already tell that if she is the daughter of Naomi, that it's his, if he wants to redeem. And so he is starting to like this very much. And so in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 9 through 10, it says, "When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather fallen grapes in your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God." So basically, God is saying here in this specific part of the law, you will not you will let the foreigner and the widow, you'll let the sojourner, like Ruth, glean after you to take up what they need so that they can eat, so that they can have provision for themselves as well. And so this is a place in the law where Ruth is allowed to glean in the field of Boaz. So the law is starting to stack up in her favor. Watch this. And now in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 22, chapter 23, verse 22, and it says, "And when you reap your harvest of your land, you shall not reap your fields right up to its edge, nor shall you gather and glean the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God." So it is saying for the poor, for the sojourner. So this is the same thing. It's three times it's said. So look at the third time. It is in Deuteronomy chapter 24. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 21. Doo-doo-doo. "And when you gather grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterward. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow." Ruth is a widow. She's a sojourner. And so she is also, and right now she's fatherless because she went with Naomi. And Naomi, she basically completely abandoned her family to stay with Naomi. So she's the fatherless, she's the sojourner, and she's the widow, all in the same aspect. And so she is allowed to reap and glean. So see how the law has stacked up in her favor. And so the law forbade Moabites from joining the assembly of the Lord, but the law also allowed Ruth to glean in the field, appearing three times more than the one law that was prohibiting her from ever going into the congregation of Israel. There was more in the law that was for her than there was against her. And so this is the application to our lives. Even though the law is contrary to us, the Lord has stacked the law in our favor. And the one who approaches it in faith will always have the law stacked in their favor. And he has ensured that there is more for us than there will ever be against us in Christ. And so Then Boaz promised to protect Ruth and provide for her hunger and her thirst, and to also give her more so that she could take it back to Naomi. So when we go back to Ruth, all right, Ruth, Ruth chapter 2, and then I will not let the young men touch you, and nor will you will also, when you are thirsty, you will go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn, saying that the young men will take care of you because I have said so. They are my servants and they will serve you. So we can see this aspect. You see, Jesus, when he came into this earth, he said, I will protect you. No enemy will ever come against you. I have overcome the world. And then he says, I will provide for your hunger and your thirst. He talks about this in Matthew chapter 5 when he's talking about do not care for your life, do not care for the cares of this world, but hasn't your heavenly Father called you more precious than many sparrows? And so he's saying, I will provide for you. You don't ever have to worry about that. I will provide for you. And so we see this aspect of the Lord again, his love for his bride. And so then we go on and we see that Ruth basically says, why are you noticing me? I'm a foreigner. And this is wrong. But and then Boaz says, all that I have done for you and your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been full. But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and now and how you left your father and mother in your native land and came to a people that did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done. Basically, he's saying the Lord will repay you for your faithfulness, and and you will have a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under those wings of whom you have come to take refuge. So he says, under the Lord's kanaf, will find a blessing, because you have stood under his wing, under his arms per se, the protection of the Lord. And so it says, whom you have come to take refuge. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, and you have comforted me and spoke kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. And at a mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in some wine. And so she sat beside the reapers, and to uh, she passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied. And then she had some left over, and she rose to glean. Boaz instructed his young men, saying, hey, let her glean among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Basically saying, let her do a little bit more. She wants to feel important. She wants to do something. So let her glean a little bit more. Let her have more. I want her to have more success. Basically, he's like, uh, don't let her stray off too much. Let her feel like she's worthy to come into my field. Basically, Boaz is trying to basically win her over. He's trying to be slick. He's just like, hey, come on, let's do this. And so do not rebuke her. And she gleaned in the field until evening, and then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw that she had gleaned what she had gleaned, and she also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. And she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and she said, that man's name with whom I work today is Boaz. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. So basically, what she's saying is that Naomi had her fill. After Ruth had finished gleaning and ate her fill, she was able to actually go and it was told to her mother in law, and her mother in law was satisfied with the work and with the provision that Ruth had brought home. So Boaz was able to let her have more than enough. She said, he said, I will give you bread to eat and seed to sow. So he gave her all of the gleanings that she had, which was an ephah. An ephah is very much, it's a lot. And so she took back home to Naomi. Naomi saw it and she was astonished. She was like, blessed be the person who lets you do all this, because this is unheard of. You're a Moabite. Boaz went above and beyond out of love. You see, by law, he was allowed to let Naomi glean in his field as a servant, but out of love and admiration for how Ruth was treating Naomi, he let her glean more than enough so that she could provide for her family. And so, basically, love goes above and beyond the demands of the law. By law, Boaz could not rebuke her for gleaning from the fields, but because of love, he chose to go above and beyond what the law demanded. Going over and beyond is what is beyond what is required reveals where the affections of your heart lie. And then we're going to go to First Chronicles chapter 29, verse 3. First Chronicles chapter 29. 29 verse 3. Moreover, in addition to all that I have provided for the holy house, I, because of my devotion to the house of my God, I give it to the house of my God 3,000 talents of gold, and of the gold of Ophir, and of the gold of Ophir, and 7,000 talents of refined silver for the overlaying of the walls of the house. So basically, in Chronicles, it talks about I go above and beyond. So everything that he needed was already provided for. But he said, I will go above and beyond and I will give out of my portion. I will get out of what I have and I'll give it to you because I love you. God, David said, I love my God so much that I will give out of my own storehouse for the house of the Lord. So when he said that let her glean even behind the sheaves to get right up close to the reapers and pick up whatever she could, that was him saying, let her glean from my portion. You see, she had her portion. She was gathering from her own portion, but he said, let her get right up close and take what I own because I want her to have more. And so we see that aspect of the Lord. He said, I want them to reap of my own. My righteousness I give, my peace I give. By his by the chastisement we were given peace. And so we have to see this aspect of the Lord and we have to know that he really does love us and that he has given us a portion of himself. He has given us a portion and he has called us kings and priests. He has called us a holy people. And he's called us a beautiful bride, and he's ready and willing to give us a portion of himself so that he can go above and beyond what the law requires. All right. Thank you guys for paying attention, and thank you guys for listening in. I hope that you guys have learned something. We will continue in this story next week. Ruth and Boaz has such a much more deeper value than what we see on the surface. And we've only just scratched the surface of what the bride and the bridegroom look like. So go in peace. We'll see you next time.